Pretty fun case review today. We saw this case getting made recently, as in like literally this exact case. This was assembled in front of us on the assembly line when we toured the factory when we were in China. While we were there, we asked Cooler Master if we could pick one from the line and then sign across some of the packaging seals and the panels to make absolutely certain that it wasn't tampered with. Kind of cool. Maybe this will kickstart a new meta of flying out to the factory to handpick the review samples and make sure they're not tampered with. Okay, it's kind of, it maybe not that feasible, but it was very interesting. And when I first pitched the idea to Cooler Master, they thought I was joking, and I was not joking. We did actually go there to handpick the review sample. So this is what we're reviewing. It came fresh off the line. The case is pretty interesting. It has a lot of mechanical freedom and openness for users, which means a lot of room to mod it, but also just reconfigure it in theory. It's up to them to execute on that. That's what we're reviewing today. And there's support for basically every fan size up to 200 millimeters in 1 centimeter steps, which is pretty damn cool. But there's also some downsides to this, like always. So it has a rail system with 1 centimeter spacing with some freedom of installation options. It also has support to invert the case or keep standard orientation, but move the power supply to the top. You can flip the I/O to the top of the case. You can use the 1 centimeter spaced holes for a variety of rails, tabs, fans, and cages. The case itself is built of a mix of sturdy and high quality aluminum and steel components everywhere. It's assembled of just corners and columns, which allows modularity, although it was a letdown that the chassis itself is riveted together at the corners in a way that's restrictive versus, say, screws for the end user. The build quality is excellent, and although, like any case, it falls short in some areas, we like where this case series is going, which is good, because when the Master Frame series launched in 2021 with the MF700, so this is called the MF500. The one that launched was the MF700, and just to be clear, yes, that does stand for motherfucking. We did confirm with them officially. So when they launched with the motherfucking 700, it really was not what you'd call good. It was the opposite of that. But this one is much better. The MF500 that we're reviewing today is built with modular components, kind of like an erector set. Or if you're British and or don't like saying the word erector when you say erector set, Meccano. I think it's basically the same thing from what our British viewers have told me. And if they've told me wrong, then fight amongst yourselves. It's not my problem. So these are intended to be reconfigurable as part of what Cooler Master calls the Freeform 2.0 project. The Master Frame 500 changes price a lot. It's $150 right now. It was $180 2 days before we finalized this edit, and then a couple of weeks before that, it was $190. Since the price has changed 3 times in 1 month, we're gonna assume that a price range of $150 to $190 is accurate for this review. That is a wide range. At $150, that changes things a lot. It's much more competitive. $190 puts it in some pretty serious competition, and we'll do our best to kind of cover the full price range with the analysis. We're gonna look at it for thermals, acoustics, everything else. And again, since it came fresh off the line when we saw it getting built, we have some additional insight that we might not normally have, and we'll drop in some of that tour footage as we get through this. So let's get started. Before that, this video is brought to you by Thermal Grizzly and their new Duronaut thermal paste. Thermal Grizzly claims its Duronaut paste is intended for long-term stability and endurance, focusing on paste longevity in addition to the usual performance focus. Thermal Grizzly's Duronaut paste comes with applicators and spreaders, and ships in numerous tube sizes, aiming to provide a high-end paste for PC builds and daily driven overclocks by enthusiasts. Learn more at the link in the description below. All right, so this case has 2 200mm fans in the front, one 120mm fan in the rear. That's the stock configuration for the MF500. And Cooler Master has a history with 200mm fans where they have managed to make both some of the absolute worst performing cases with 200mm fans in the front, and they have also managed to make some of the best executed cases with 200mm fans in the front. Fortunately, this is on the better side of that scale. Cooler Master has over the years moved away from when it would put plastic in front of the fans and use them as ornaments and decorations for the most part, and it's been mostly an improvement since then. The reason that fans of this size in particular are very sensitive to the restrictions or obstructions in front of them is because they spin slower, it's a larger hole, it can move more air through that hole at a slower speed, lower noise mostly with a lower frequency typically, as long as it's not obstructed because they just don't have the static pressure performance you get from a smaller fan that can move air through a smaller hole at a faster speed. So this is on the better side though. Other than the size of the fans, this is a fully conventional layout. Power supply shroud at the bottom, normal motherboard orientation, and it has typical airflow paths. The manual describes two main alternate configurations, which are moving the power supply to the top of the case in the typical layout, or inverting the case entirely, which is what we have on the table today. There are smaller items that can be moved around, like the front I/O and the drive mount, not plural, we're going to come back to that, but those are the most transformative options. Cooler Master's future expansion on this series hopes to add more modularity, but we don't review future promises, we review what's actually shipping, so that's not what we're going to look at today. The current DIY style master frame cases feel closer to the Cube 500 flat pack from Cooler Master than they do to the original Master Frame 700, which is good because again, the MF700 sucked. Unlike the flat pack though, the MF500 ships pre-assembled, and the pillars and corners that make up the, as they call it, exostructure of the case are riveted, which may come as a surprise if you've been following the marketing. So Cooler Master's plans long-term are to allow users to order the corners and the columns, ship them to your home, and then you can assemble it however you want, but they hope that they can have some kind of online web configurator tool where you can basically drag and drop, move pieces around, lay it out how you want because of the sort of even spacing of holes and tabs and things like that, and basically make your own case. That is their long-term goal, is to get the pieces out to people. The short term is that you buy it on Amazon and it ships as a case. That's how it is right now. It's a very cool long-term goal. We like it. It's just not here yet. When they do execute that, they actually just got a California-based warehouse where they plan to store the parts and then do a midterm goal, which is assembly of the cases as configured on the site, leading into the eventual shipment, of the pieces to you. But that's not where they are today. So we're going to review the box like this, but we do like the direction of it if they can actually pull it off. Currently, the amount of rivets means even replacing them with screws would make it an absolute nightmare, something we witnessed firsthand when we saw the hand-assembled model get taken apart at Computex over a span of 10 to 20 minutes. The MF500 reminds us of the old CaseLabs designs in a way. We revisited those a couple years ago. They had a similar ring of holes around the perimeter. For a case with a modular DIY focus, starting with a comparison to CaseLabs is a really good sign for Cooler Master. Except for the part where CaseLabs went out of business, but that's not the part of the comparison we're making today. It's the mechanical part. Case reconfiguration can take a while if you take the James May approach to it.
I am going to use my tweezers because it should mean that you can see what's happening better. Now I'm trying to get away. Hang on.
The manual describes a 17-step process for moving the power supply to the top of the case, and then a further 10 steps for inverting the whole case, not including the optional 7 steps for inverting the front I/O. It's not as bad as the Dark-Base Pro 900, but unbuilding the system, inverting the case for the first time, rebuilding, and then running the test took most of a workday for Patrick. It would have sped things up a little bit if the case didn't use a mix of M4 and 6S32 screws that look similar at a glance, and also would have sped things up if we took the Jeremy Clarkson approach instead. One of the major upsides of this case design is that fan mounting options are flexible. Fans can be either centered by using tabs that attach to the edges of the case, or installed off-center using a long rail. The rails are sized to fit the sides, bottom, and top, and the tabs fit the front, bottom, and top. We would have liked a couple of extra tabs to work with. Cooler Master lists compatibility with 120, 140, 180, and 200mm fans, but because the holes along the case perimeter are spaced 1 centimeter apart, the rails in particular are compatible with any fan size under 200mm. So that's pretty cool. It means you could throw some weird sizes in there if you wanted to, like 150 or 160mm fans. The various case elements are made from surprisingly thick metals. For example, the tabs are 2mm thick and the long rails are 3mm thick. The result of that is a really high build quality actually. This is one of the sturdiest, most rigid cases that we've worked with, and just mechanically it does feel pretty nice to work on the case. Not that that does a whole lot for you thermally, but it's just there's something about knowing the materials are a little sturdier that can be nice on a case that's almost $200. You don't always get that now. Support for 3.5-inch and even 2.5-inch drives is starting to wane industry-wide, but we were surprised to see that such a modular case offers precisely one drive mount. 2 metal multi-function bars are included in the accessory kit, and these can be used to either mount one fan, one SSD, or one hard drive. Not and, or. You get one of those 3. Cooler Master might sell extras, and it's likely someone will just come up with a 3D printed alternative. But this case really wants customization credit in its marketing, and it would get a lot more of that if they included more than just 2 steel strips with the out-of-box configuration, because then you could do the customizing part of the customization. That would be ideal. So we were a little disappointed with that because it's so set up perfectly for more devices, more fans, more drives with the rail system and the spacing of the holes, and then they just don't really use it. As the sticker on the case and the instructions in the manual state, panel removal is tool-free. At this point in all of our case reviews, we pretty much always say that we want to see at least one screw for security on the glass panels to just make sure it's held in place if you have to pick it up and move it or something. Cooler Master has decided not to do that, and in fact not really use screws much of anywhere for the panels, which can be okay. Their compromise to not having it fall apart is that they have used absurdly powerful magnets to hold the panels on. That is exactly how it goes in. So this is a gigantic magnet, and it is, no, now I've misaligned it. Okay, we're gonna, all right, look, it's not always easy to line them up when you're hosting, okay? The glass is similarly overly powerful as a magnet. That's a good thing for the glass panel in particular, but we still would like to see the option to just include a security screw to make sure it holds in place if you're gonna move it around. Another point that could use work is the cable management space. Some parts of it work well, some don't. This is one of those cases where you have to remember to route cables under supports, or else the side panel can't really close. The cutoffs that the power cables have to be routed through aren't all lined up with each other either, so it takes some indirect routing. The motherboard tray is structured so that when the power supply shroud is moved to the secondary location, you have to remove the end of the shroud and route cables through that path rather than behind the motherboard tray, making it significantly harder to hide cables. As a positive, the cable bar was shaped perfectly for our motherboard, sitting level with the SATA ports and USB header along the edge of the motherboard so that they're hidden, although some SATA ports were blocked on our motherboard. The good news is that it comes with one drive cage, so you're not gonna need those ports anyway. The cable bar sits on 2 rails that run the full length of the case, so it can be moved up, down, back, forth to fit flush against various boards. There's some stone and wood front panel veneer options, but this is the least exciting aspect of the case's modularity to us. None of the alternate panels that we've seen are ventilated either, so they'd completely seal the front of the case, and we're just not interested in that. And honestly, they also kind of look like someone walked into a Lowe's or Home Depot, went to the kitchen section, and selected a countertop and then put it on the front of a computer case. At least it's different though. But it completely obstructs the case, so we would strongly advise against them. Finally, there's a solid GPU support included in the accessory kit that can either stand under the GPU or hang from the roof of the case if it's inverted. All right, time to get into thermals and benchmarking, the favorite part for us of these reviews, and I think a lot of you as well, based on looking at the view retention graphs where everyone jumps to the thermal charts. And yes, we do know you skipped to this section. You've been called out. Thermal testing was done with a mix of configurations here. We did the standard layout, which is just a normal ATX layout. No changes at all, power supply on the bottom, all that stuff. That's normal these days. And then we did an alternate configuration where the power supply is moved to the top, but everything else is the same. And then we did the inverted configuration. For all 3 of these tests, we tested them the way that Cooler Master officially recommends, because we test based on what the manufacturer is advising the users to do. And in that setup, that means we moved the power supply with the case inversion as well, because that is what they recommend. For all 3 of those, the power supply was consistently pulling air from the outside of the case, not the inside, so it is always isolated in its own loop. That way it doesn't oppose the GPU fan when you're moving the power supply around, for example. Now, the GPU support was not installed for any of these tests today. We did the primary testing with the 200s in the front and then the 120 in the back. The 120 moves based on if it's inverted or not, but it's in the same actual mounting location. Direct head-to-head competitors for the MF500 mesh would be the Corsair Frame 5000D RS. It has the same focus on modularity. We actually have that one in. We've tested it. It's not on the charts yet today, but we're working towards that. It's the same price as well, roughly. It's $180, $190 or so. But since it's not on our charts yet and we're still finalizing that testing, we'll make do with the Frame 4000D RS for comparison. The caveat being that it's smaller and it is significantly cheaper. Otherwise, the MF500's price puts it up against the Fractal Torrent, some variants of the MeshFi 3, the Antec Flux Pro by price, and Arctic's brand new extender, although none of those cases have the same DIY marketing that Corsair and Cooler Master cases do. Let's get into the thermal charts and the acoustics. We'll start with noise-normalized testing, where we step down case fan speeds inside our hemianechoic chamber until we hit our 27 dBA SPL target, measured 1 meter from the front of the case. We published a video a couple years ago showing our process to build this chamber and have gotten regular use out of it since it was built. This allows us to control our acoustic environment so that outside noise doesn't affect our results. Test hardware like this is made possible through your support on store.gamersnexus.net. Alright, so starting out with CPU full load thermals noise-normalized, the MF500 landed in the middle of the chart at 46 degrees Celsius above ambient, averaged across all cores, and 49 degrees on the P cores. The Frame 4000D RS was cooler at 43 degrees all core, and the mesh fronted case is closer to the MF500's original $180 to $190 price, did even better. The Torrent was at 42 degrees, the Flux Pro at 41, the MeshFi 3 at 40, meaning that for the MF500 that's not bad, but it's also not impressive, given that we'd expect the 200mm stock fans to shine in noise-normalized testing specifically, since they're quieter for the amount of air they're moving. $150 to $200 can get you a lot of performance from other manufacturers if that's your key focus, and Cooler Master may be hoping that the modularity of the MF500 will help balance things out. Moving to GPU thermals in the same test, the average GPU temperature in the MF500 was 48 degrees Celsius above ambient and 53 degrees on the VRAM. That's behind the competition again, with the Frame 4000D RS averaging 45 degrees above ambient, the MeshFi 3 averaging 43, the Flux Pro at 41, and the Torrent at 40. The MF500 is also beaten by the normal, cheaper Antec Flux. These results could be altered by tweaking the layout of the MF500 in a number of ways though, so let's check for other configurations next. With all case fans at full speed, the all-core CPU average dropped to 42 degrees above ambient, and the P-core average dropped to 46. Moving the power supply to the top of the case dropped both averages by about 2 degrees, which is actually a noteworthy improvement and beyond just error. This change would also affect flow-through behavior, which we'll look at in the GPU chart. Flipping the entire case in addition to the power supply change didn't cause any further changes. Moving the power supply to the other side of the case means moving the power supply shroud and the motherboard tray as well, which alters airflow patterns and changes how the CPU cooler lines up with the front intake fans. For the given CPU performance, the Master Frame 500 at 39.4 dBA is louder than its immediate neighbors on the chart, like the Landcool 215. Which also uses 200mm fans at 31.1 dBA. The Frame 4000D RS and the Torrent are both louder and cooler, which is why we focus on noise-normalized tests for comparing cases. But the Flux Pro averaged 38 degrees all-core, and the MeshFi 3 averaged 39, at roughly equivalent noise levels to the MF500. Broadly speaking, the peak performance of the MF500 using stock fans alone is underwhelming. GPU thermals tell a different story. The stock case configuration averaged 47 degrees above ambient, but top mounting the power supply caused no change, while inverting the case increased the average to 48. This isn't much of a change though. We expect that moving or adding fans would have a greater effect than either of the case reconfigurations did. The GPU thermal results are weaker in comparison to the rest of the chart than the CPU thermals were. The Frame 4000D RS was at 42 degrees for average GPU temperature, the MeshFi 3 was at 41, the Torrent at 39, and the Flux Pro at 38. So at 38 versus 47 to 48 for the MF500, that is a massive range. They're pretty different cases for some of these versus the MF500, but the MF500 is not particularly competitive here. These alternatives at the top of the chart are significantly better, although with the MF500's fluctuating price, there are times that it is tens of dollars cheaper than some of these. It just depends on when you check. And finally, we typically examine VRM and RAM thermals from the noise-normalized results, but in this instance, it's more interesting to compare the different case configurations which were tested with the case fans at full speed. The inverted case was best for VRM thermals with an average of 26 degrees Celsius above ambient out of the MF500s. The stock configuration of the top-mounted power supply config tied at 27. The inverted configuration was also best for RAM thermals, with a 19-degree average, but the top mount power supply layout beat the stock layout by 1 degree at 20 versus 21, which is basically error at that point. All right, so we like the direction of the MF500. Cooler Master's done some pretty good things with the concept for the motherfucking 500 series of cases and the MF series of cases in general. They kind of have that Corsair like ebb and flow to really solid execution, which is mostly what this series is so far. We had the criticism we went through, but overall this is a good execution. And then occasionally oscillating into just terrible cases or complete silence for a couple of years. So they have improved a lot for this cycle. They're in one of the better sides of their sort of process right now, and we like where it's going. This has a sort of utilitarian, almost opposite feel to it than the more fanciful cases on the market. So like the Height X50 is basically the total opposite in terms of the ethos from this case. This is a utilitarian, like you can mod it, in theory, you can buy modular components, in theory, and you can expand on the case, rearrange it, and kind of do what you want. Something like the Height X50 is more of they had a specific vision, they did a lot of really creative and fancy manufacturing maneuvers to execute on it, and we have a review of that coming up separately, by the way, but it's not like this. And so the two totally different approaches. Fractal is another example where they've got that mix of utility, but then they're also experimenting with things like woods and fabrics and different panels, whereas this is a metal box that is reconfigurable. And I think a lot of people in our audience like this type of case. People clearly like the other ones as well. Fractal North has done very well for itself. But this is kind of core to what Cooler Master has done best in terms of its own approach. This is a case that'll be best in the hands of modders who want to cut, print, and drill their own parts. If you have a 3D printer, this would probably be a lot of fun for you because everyone with a 3D printer wants to create a problem to solve, and this can do that. We wish some aspects were more modular. Specifically, it'd be cool to be able to disassemble the corners and the edges that make up the basic structure of the case. We'd also like to have some spare multifunction bars, some fan mounting tabs, and maybe some of the longer metal rails as well. This is probably asking for a higher price in some capacity, but that would at least better execute on what they're marketing. Their direct competitor to this case is the Corsair Frame 5000D. Modular parts for the new Corsair Frame cases still haven't really appeared yet, although Corsair has offered us a motherboard tray for testing, so the two cases are in a race to see which one will have more useful options available first. Cooler Master is already publicly hosting 3D files for the major components of the MasterFrame 500 mesh and the MF600, and it maintains a printables page for accessories. Corsair began offering some 3D printing files during Computex for its other projects, but is overall behind on this aspect compared to Cooler Master right now. The MF500 also has a heavier, more solid feeling construction than Corsair's frame cases, if that's something you care about. In terms of thermals, there are easily higher performance cases available for $200. Each of the high-end mesh fronted cases we compared to, namely the Mesh 3, the Torrent, and the Flux Pro, outperformed the MF500. The smaller, cheaper, and theoretically modular Corsair Frame 4000 DRS ARGB also generally performed better, but it is smaller. With the MF500, you're paying for the ability to easily customize it, and I guess the sturdy construction. Ultimately, at $150, this is significantly more competitive than the $180 price, despite its thermal deficiency versus other cases. It performs okay thermally in our benchmarks, but it isn't anywhere near as good as several other $180 and $200 cases, which is where this was priced when we started reviewing it. Fortunately, if it stays at $150, it drops to a lower price class, and that compensates a lot for the middling thermal performance. Also, at $150, we think the build quality is atypically good. Now at $180 or $190, it's still good build quality. It's just there's other competition at that price point since you're getting into the kind of that upper echelon of cases. It's tough to nail down a recommendation since we don't know why the price keeps changing or where it'll stay. But if it stays at $150 and you're okay with having something that's not the best thermal performer but has this sort of modular mechanical approach to things, then it's definitely worth considering. At $180, it's still worth considering, but it's also worth considering a lot of the other competition that we named going through the thermal section. So that'll be it for this review. Fun to do these case reviews as always. We've got others up, the Fractal Epic case, or Epoch, or Epoch. Yes, we did all three pronunciations for you in that review just to make sure we maximized how many people were annoyed by the video. That review is up. You should check that out too. We did that a while ago. This is a good spot for Cooler Master. Again, I've seen them through a lot of ups and downs over the years. This is an up right now. So I guess get it while it's good because we don't know how long these last. Hopefully they're consistent this time. But yeah, we like where the case is going. You're basically paying for how thick these metals are and the aluminum. And there's a lot of cheaper options out there. If you want something cheaper, we've got plenty of reviews of that stuff. But that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net to support us directly. And you can go to patreon.com/gamersnexus to throw a few bucks our way. We'll see you all next time.